I was standing in front of my secondary education class. My fellow future teachers were sitting there, along with my professor. Our assignment was to teach a 5-minute lesson to our class. And for some strange reason, I had chosen the topic, how to be a good public speaker. And yet, as I stood up there, prepared to be an expert on speaking, my palms began to sweat, my face began to sweat, my stomach began to sweat and turn about in my belly, and I felt physically sore and sick. And I ran out of the room, and in the men's room, I refunded my lunch, so to speak. I had been hit with something called glossophobia. It's a word that comes from the Greek glossa, meaning tongue, and phobos, meaning fear. And glossophobia is the #1 fear in humans. When you are asked to speak to a crowd, many people begin to feel that same physical distress I did. They get the nausea, the panic, the upset stomach. Some even have diarrhea. And it's all caused by that remarkable reaction humans call flight or fight. And public speaking, it manifests itself not just in that physical reaction, but in your vocalization as well. You start feeling very tense, and you start talking in a quivering voice. And you start vocalizing your pauses. For those Toastmasters out there, we often know that as ums and ahs and you knows. So you get really nervous and you start going, what was I going to say? And it frustrates people that they have all these things that they want to say, and yet they can't say them. But there is a solution to glossophobia. And it doesn't require medication. It doesn't require doing anything bizarre. All it takes is a little bit of effort and an understanding of what can trigger your glossophobia. The first way to reduce that anxiety is to talk about a topic you know well. That was my mistake. I chose a topic I did not know well at the time. While other of my classmates were talking about things in their majors, the math teachers were talking about how to measure an angle. The English teachers were analyzing a short excerpt from Shakespeare. The shop teachers were telling us about shop safety. I was talking about something that was so far out of my element, it wasn't even funny. By knowing your stuff and believing in your topic, you feel more like an expert yourself. And you can practice that as you drive or as you're at home, in front of a mirror, in front of your family. And just talk. As you get more comfortable talking about this topic you are an expert in, start opening it up to smaller groups, friends, or family, or a remarkable club known as Toastmasters. Toastmasters are a great place to start practicing your public speaking because the small groups are incredibly friendly and supportive and are remarkably helpful for first-time speakers, especially when they get up and do their first speech, the icebreaker. Now, speaking of icebreakers, if you're still feeling those little nerves when you go up, one of the easiest things to do is to open with a joke or an anecdote that you've told many, many times before, especially if it relates to your topic. If you're a car mechanic, for example, and you're talking about preventative maintenance, you might have a story about the person who ignored car maintenance for long enough and turned what could have been a $30 fix into a $900 problem. We all have stories like that we've told many times, jokes that we tell many times, and breaking that ice with your audience will allow the anxiety to flow away. Now, speaking of anxiety and your audiences, one thing you need to know about is something that is called the illusion of transparency. And it is part of the problem of glossophobia and speech anxiety. And what it comes down to is that we as speakers overestimate the ability of our audience to read our mental state. We're going up there, we're feeling incredibly nervous, and we think the audience can see that. And I've seen many speakers come up and actually say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so nervous." When in reality, the audience didn't know until you mentioned it. And then, of course, they're going to start seeing it. Now, researchers Kenneth Slavinsky and Thomas Gilovich did a very fascinating study on speech anxiety and this illusion of transparency. They took multiple people who didn't have a lot of speaking experience, gave them a speech topic, and split them into 3 groups. The control group had no instructions other than give a 5-minute speech to an audience. There was the group that was reassured that it was normal to feel anxiety, but don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. And the third group was informed that it is normal to feel anxiety, but in reality, the audience isn't going to know. And what they found was the group that realized that the audience can't read your mental state very well. They rated themselves higher, they felt a lot less stress, and as a result delivered much better speeches. So if you're looking to combat glossophobia, remember that you can reduce your anxiety by talking on a topic you know well, practicing it in front of a small group or alone, and realize the audience isn't going to notice your nervousness. And this all ends, I think, with Jerry Seinfeld, who said it best. Glossophobia is the number 1 fear in the world. Number 2 is death, which means at a funeral, most people would rather be the corpse in the coffin than the person delivering the eulogy. But now, knowing what you know about giving speeches, speech anxiety, glossophobia, and the illusion of transparency, the next time you come up and give a speech, I think you'll do a much better job. Thank you.